Deputy Kyle Rourke had done this hundreds of times. A black woman driving alone on a deserted stretch of highway, no witnesses, no backup, just him and the badge on his chest. He always believed he was in control. She would argue, cite laws, but in the end she would comply. They always did. But Colonel Maya Sheridan was not like the others. In his eyes, she was just a civilian. He didn't see a seasoned military officer, one who had commanded, who had fought, who had won in places where life was measured in seconds. He couldn't comprehend the iron discipline, the inner strength, the unshakable will forged in brutal combat, and he certainly didn't realize that every order he barked, every swaggering move he made, only brought him closer to bitter defeat. When he crossed the line, clinging to the illusion of absolute authority, he didn't just pick the wrong target. He sparked a battle that would end it all. That afternoon, golden sunlight poured over the quiet road as Maya drove her SUV home, having just left a veteran's honor ceremony. Her military uniform was neatly folded in a garment bag hanging from the passenger seat, while she wore civilian clothes, a navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, and perfectly pressed slacks. A quick glance in the rearview mirror, red and blue lights flashing behind, made her brow furrow. She wasn't speeding. She hadn't swerved. She broke no laws, so why was the patrol car tailing her? She sighed and pulled over. Years in the military had taught her to stay calm in any situation. But this time, something felt off. Rourke stepped out, his heavy boots crunching over gravel, broad shoulders, rigid gait, badge gleaming in the afternoon light. As he reached the window, his gaze carried no professionalism, only contempt, the kind Maya had seen too many times in her life, license and registration. He said coldly. Maya calmly opened her wallet, retrieved her license, and handed it over. "Is there a reason for this stop?" "Officer." He glanced at the card, then quickly scanned her face again, silently assessing her as if waiting for a mistake. "Step out of the vehicle." Her hand tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Excuse me, step out of the vehicle," he repeated, slower this time, daring her to react. Maya exhaled softly. "I'd like to know the reason for this stop. I haven't done anything wrong." Rourke's half-smile was more of a warning than an answer. Suspicious behavior. Step out now. She had seen this scenario before, but she knew resisting now would be a mistake. She opened the door and stepped out, her hands clearly visible. Rourke circled the vehicle, peered inside, then returned to face her. "Where are you headed, home?" "I just left a military event." He scoffed. "Military? Huh? And what exactly are you?" Maya stood tall, voice steady. "I'm Colonel Maya Sheridan, United States Army." A moment of silence, then a dismissive laugh. "Oh, a colonel. Huh, you sure about that?" "Absolutely." "Where's your military ID?" Maya reached into her jacket pocket, then her wallet. Nothing. She searched again. Empty. The memory flashed she had left it in the uniform pocket in her base locker. "I don't have my military ID on me," she said. "How convenient." Rourke sneered, flipping the driver's license back and forth. "No proof of veteran status either. I have my vehicle registration in the glove compartment." "I'll take a closer look," he said, moving toward the vehicle. "You don't have a warrant to search my car," she stated firmly. "Suspicious behavior is enough," his voice heavy with condescension. "You're awfully tense, ma'am." Maya clenched her jaw. She had dealt with men like this before, the kind who believed a badge was a license to dominate and demean. But she didn't push back, not because she was afraid, but because she was waiting. She knew he would go too far, and when he did, she'd be ready. As I said, I'm Colonel Maya Sheridan, United States Army. My ID is inside my uniform, which is currently secured in a locker on base. Deputy Kyle Rourke let out a long whistle, slowly shaking his head. Is that so? And you expect me to believe that just because you say so? It's the truth. He flipped her driver's license in his hand, his voice laced with mockery. I don't see the word colonel anywhere on this. No veteran status, no military rank, not even a hint that you've ever worn a uniform. He clicked his tongue. A real soldier would want everyone to know it. Maya didn't react. She was all too familiar with men like Rourke, those who wielded authority like a weapon, judging by skin color and gender. She knew this had nothing to do with credentials or documentation. This was a game of control. Your department must have a database, she said calmly. Run my name, you'll find my record. Rourke gave a soft laugh. I could, but I don't feel like it. I prefer the old school way. He tilted his head, his smile sharp as a blade. All right then. Step away from the vehicle. Maya's eyes narrowed. I complied when you asked me to pull over. Now you're escalating without cause. Ma'am, Rourke said in a sickly sweet tone, I've asked nicely. Don't make this complicated. I will not step away from my vehicle unless you give me a lawful reason. The smile vanished from Rourke's face, replaced by a cold expression. You're refusing a lawful order from an officer. I'm refusing an unlawful demand. Maya corrected, her voice steady. You have no probable cause to search my car, and certainly no grounds to detain me. Rourke sighed, his fingers tapping lightly on his belt. Well, now, things are getting messy. A driver refusing a lawful command sounds like resisting, and resisting. He clicked his tongue. That tends to go bad real fast. She sensed the shift. He'd dropped the act. Now came the part where he pushed her to the brink, looking for a reason to justify what he had intended all along. Are you threatening to arrest me? She asked, tilting her head. Rourke leaned in closer, his voice low but pointed. I'm just saying, Colonel, if you really are a colonel, that disobeying a police officer never ends well. He smirked. And between us, I don't think you're special enough to be the exception. Maya understood this game. She'd trained the soldiers on psychological tactics, how to deal with adversaries who tried to manipulate emotions. He wanted her to snap, to lose control, to give him a reason to escalate. But she wouldn't give him that. She looked him straight in the eye, unwavering. I know my rights, Deputy Rourke, and I know exactly what you're doing. So either arrest me or let me go. The tension between them thickened. Rourke hadn't expected this. He expected submission, but Maya wasn't afraid, and that infuriated him. His hand hovered near his radio, jaw clenched. A step closer, voice low and cold. Then it's your choice. Maya didn't move. You're under arrest. She remained still, her breath steady. Rourke stared at her, waiting for a reaction, but she didn't flinch, not a trace of fear. His frustration flickered in his eyes as he reached for his radio. Dispatch, I've got a possible 1029. Send backup to my location. His voice was calm, each word deliberate. Maya knew the code. 10-29 meant wanted person. He was fabricating a scenario, laying the groundwork before verifying anything. She exhaled. You're making a mistake. Deputy Rourke. He clipped the radio back to his belt, lips curling. "Oh yeah, because last I checked, refusing a cop's order was the mistake." He nodded toward her car. "Now, step aside." Maya stood her ground. "You have no legal reason to search my vehicle." Rourke moved in closer, lowering his voice like he was offering one last chance. "And yet, I'm still going to search it." Maya clenched her jaw. "That's an unlawful search. You seem really into the law." He shrugged. "If there's nothing in there, you've got nothing to worry about." Before she could respond, Rourke opened the driver's door. Maya clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay calm. She knew any strong reaction would give him an excuse to act. He rummaged through her things without restraint, popped open the center console, dumped documents and personal items onto the seat. "What kind of business you running out of this SUV? Colonel smuggling theft of military property." She took a deep breath. "You're crossing the line." "Where do you see a line?" he snapped, moving around to the passenger side. He yanked open the passenger door, tossed her bag aside, and began tearing through it. Maya didn't react. Her hand brushed her phone inside her jacket. She knew exactly who to call. Without a word, she subtly turned her body, shielding the phone from his view. She dialed. "This is Colonel Sheridan," she said firmly. "I need a favor. Right now." Rourke, too absorbed in dismantling her belongings, didn't notice that the balance had shifted. The more he searched, the more frustrated he became. He found nothing he could use against her. And Maya Sheridan knew the game he thought he was winning had just slipped from his grasp. Deputy Kyle Rourke's hands tore through the glove compartment, center console, and even beneath the seats, flinging Maya's personal belongings onto the car floor without hesitation. Maya Sheridan stood just a few steps away, motionless as a statue. She didn't resist, didn't say a word. That silence only infuriated Rourke further. He slammed the passenger door shut and turned toward her with a threatening smirk. "Where is it?" Maya blinked. "Where is" what Rourke exhaled sharply, gesturing to the mess he'd just made. "Whatever you're hiding, fake documents, stolen goods, drugs." He trailed off, realizing, even as he said it, how absurd it sounded. Maya still said nothing. "You think this is a joke?" Rourke stepped closer, his voice dropping like a blade. "You think staying calm means I'm going to let this go?" Maya raised her chin slightly, gaze steady. "Are you done?" He let out a dry laugh and shook his head. "Just getting started." He grabbed his radio, pressing the button harder than necessary. "Dispatch, requesting K-9 backup for vehicle inspection, possible narcotics or contraband." The radio responded almost instantly. "Unit 13, hold your position. You have an urgent call from command." "Patching through now." Rourke frowned. Command. He hadn't contacted anyone higher than the shift supervisor. Still holding the radio, he stepped away and changed frequencies. "This is Deputy Rourke, awaiting instructions." A pause. Then a voice rang out, sharp, authoritative. "Deputy Rourke, this is Captain Marcus Reynolds. What the hell do you think you're doing?" Rourke froze, a captain from headquarters. He stammered, I was just, are you deaf?" Captain Reynolds barked, "You're unlawfully detaining Colonel Maya Sheridan, a decorated officer of the United States Army. Cease all actions immediately. Escort her to the station and issue a formal apology. Right now." Rourke's hand trembled slightly around the radio. "Sir, She didn't have her ID. No veteran status on her license." "Excuse me," Reynolds snapped. "You bypassed protocol, searched her car without cause, harassed a senior officer like some backwoods rookie fresh out of academy. Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Maya remained still, her expression unchanging, her stance unshaken. Rourke looked at her, a wave of shame and shock crashing into his chest. He felt exposed, stripped down. The radio crackled again. "What are you waiting for?" "Get her to the station, then report to my office immediately. Pray, I don't pull your badge by the end of the day." The signal cut. Rourke stood frozen, gripping the radio, humiliation written all over his face. Maya walked toward him, each step steady and quiet. She looked him square in the eye and said evenly, "Are you done now?" Rourke's jaw clenched so tight it hurt. He had no choice. He turned without a word, walked to the patrol car, and opened the door. "Get in." Maya returned to her SUV, calmly gathering her belongings and restoring order. Then she closed the door, walked to the patrol car, opened the back door, and got in like someone in control, not a criminal. Rourke slammed the door, his grip on the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. The tires screeched as he pulled away from the shoulder. Maya sat quietly, eyes straight ahead, her voice calm. "Drive carefully, officer." Rourke's jaw flexed so hard it seemed his lips might bleed. The entire ride to the station was silent except for the low growl of the engine under the weight of tension. As the car rolled into the lot, Rourke practically leapt out of the seat and stormed inside. Maya followed, unhurried, unbothered. As they stepped into the station, the room fell still. All eyes turned to them, some whispered, others avoided Rourke's gaze. The duty sergeant said quietly into the intercom, "She's here." Maya saw Rourke's shoulders flinch. He knew what was coming. Moments later, a door opened. A man with salt and pepper hair and piercing eyes stepped out. Chief Warren Mitchell, a name she'd heard before. "Colonel Sheridan," he said, voice respectful but firm, then turned to Rourke. "In my office, now." Rourke hesitated for just a second, enough to make Mitchell frown. He stiffened and stepped in first. Maya followed. When the door closed behind them, the air turned heavy. Rourke stood at attention, but his hands betrayed his nerves. Maya sat, legs crossed, calm and composed. Mitchell stared into Rourke. "I want to know what made you think detaining a U.S. Army colonel was a smart decision." Rourke's jaw clenched. "Sir, she was non-compliant. No ID, no veteran designation." Maya Sheridan stood motionless on the roadside, her gaze cold and unflinching as Deputy Kyle Rourke continued tearing apart her SUV. He opened every compartment, throwing her belongings around as if she were hiding some dark secret. Her silence only fueled his rage. "What the hell are you hiding?" Rourke barked. "Hiding what?" "Exactly." Maya raised an eyebrow, her voice even. Rourke gestured at the chaos he'd created: fake documents, contraband, drugs. He paused, realizing even he sounded ridiculous. Maya still gave no reaction, and that only made his anger flare higher. "You think you're clever. Think staying calm means I'll let it slide." He snarled, stepping closer, voice dropping into a threat. Maya lifted her chin, eyes locked on his. "Are you finished?" Rourke snorted, yanked his radio with unnecessary force, and barked, "Requesting K-9 unit at my location. Possible narcotics or contraband." His radio immediately crackled back, "Unit 13. Cease all activity. Incoming emergency call from command. Patching through." Rourke's brow furrowed. He hadn't reported this to anyone higher than the shift sergeant. "This is Deputy Rourke," he answered. A pause. Then a voice rang out. Sharp and commanding Deputy Rourke. "This is Captain Reynolds. What the hell do you think you're doing?" Rourke froze. That voice from headquarters sweat prickled at the back of his neck. "You are unlawfully detaining Colonel Maya Sheridan, a decorated Army officer. Cease all actions immediately. Escort her to the station and prepare to issue a formal apology." Rourke swallowed hard, stammered. "Sir, you overstepped, conducted an illegal search, harassed a senior officer like some wet-behind-the-ears patrolman. You've embarrassed this entire department." Maya remained still, her expression unreadable. Rourke stood in disbelief. How had they found out so fast? "What are you waiting for? Escort her now. And be ready to report to me in person when you return. Pray your badge survives the day." The signal cut out. Rourke stood frozen, radio trembling in his hand from rage and humiliation. Maya stepped forward, her eyes like blades. "Are you done now?" Rourke clenched his jaw and silently opened the patrol car door, not daring to look at her. Maya calmly picked up her belongings, returned them to their places in the SUV, closed the door, then walked to the patrol car and got in the back, not like a suspect, but like someone in control. The car roared away. Maya sat still, staring ahead, voice light as air. "Drive safe, officer." Rourke gritted his teeth. She had won, and he knew it. At the station, the curious stares from his co-workers nearly drove Rourke mad. He opened the door and slouched inside, Maya walking behind him with poised confidence. At the front desk, the sergeant barely had time to press the intercom. "She's here." Moments later, Chief Warren Mitchell stepped out, eyes sharp as knives, scanning the both of them. "Colonel Sheridan." He nodded polite but pointed. Then to Rourke, "My office. Now." Inside. The room felt like it had no air. Mitchell stared at Rourke like he was burning holes in his skull. "What made you think detaining a colonel without verifying her identity was a smart idea? Do you know who just called me the Pentagon?" Rourke stood stiffly, fists clenched. Maya simply sat quietly, needing to say nothing more. Mitchell sighed, turned to her, and said, "On behalf of this department, I sincerely apologize for today's misconduct. Colonel, I hope procedures will change so this doesn't happen again." Maya replied curtly, "Understood." Mitchell nodded, then turned to Rourke. "Apologize." "I'm sorry," Rourke muttered. Maya tilted her head. "For what I'm sorry for my misconduct today. I was wrong. It won't happen again." Mitchell growled. "Effective immediately, you're suspended pending review. If it were up to me, your badge would already be gone." Maya rose, coolly adjusting her blazer. "Thank you for your cooperation, Chief." As she turned to leave, Rourke muttered under his breath, "You set me up." "I didn't have to," Maya said, voice light as the wind. Mitchell turned a razor-sharp gaze on Rourke. "Say one more word, and I'll have you out of here myself." Rourke fell silent, but his eyes burned. Maya knew his type. They never forgot humiliation, and they never backed down. But neither did she, because this was a game she understood all too well, and next time she'd be even more ready. The sedan didn't overtake her, didn't tailgate aggressively, and didn't adjust its speed to match traffic naturally. It just followed quietly. Maya Sheridan exhaled slowly, her posture relaxed, hands steady on the wheel, but her mind had already shifted into calculation mode. If it were just another driver on the same route, the car would have changed lanes or passed her within seconds. But it didn't. Instead, it crept closer. Maya's fingers tightened slightly around the wheel, not from fear, but in preparation. The driver held position in her blind spot too long, approaching with a smoothness that felt deliberate. No signal, no attempt to pass. Then suddenly, the sedan accelerated. Not a casual press of the gas, a lunge like it meant to close the gap as fast as possible. In that split second, Maya's body reacted before her mind could even process instinct, intuition, all kicking in at once. She flicked her eyes to the side mirror, and for a single flashing second, she saw the driver's face, Deputy Kyle Rourke, out of uniform, face twisted with hatred. His hands clenched the steering wheel like he meant to snap it in half. No more fake composure, no more badge to hide behind, just a man unhinged, desperate to reclaim control by destroying her. Maya took a deep breath. He had nothing left to lose. That made him dangerous but also sloppy. He surged forward, trying to force her off the road. She didn't panic, didn't brake, didn't swerve wildly like he wanted. Instead, she tilted the steering wheel subtly, a move that seemed instinctual. Kyle took the bait. He shot ahead, trying to cut her off, but Maya suddenly jerked the wheel the opposite direction, slicing across his trajectory. Tires shrieked as Kyle fought to correct, but it was too late. He yanked the wheel, the car rocked violently. Maya kept control. Eyes locked on him. She saw the moment it registered the shock, the realization she wasn't someone who backed down. Kyle came at her again, this time more recklessly. His car swerved erratically, cutting across lanes. It wasn't just pursuit anymore. It was combat silent, brutal, between two people who knew each other better than they wanted to admit. The highway stretched emptier, the city now miles behind, only forest and asphalt ahead. He had led her here on purpose, and Maya had let him. She knew she couldn't avoid this confrontation forever. In the distance, the road curved into a clearing, flanked by thick trees. Kyle's car slowed, sliding toward the center of the lane. Maya eased off the gas, hands still firm on the wheel, breathing even. When both vehicles stopped, the silence was eerie too complete. The sedan screeched to a halt. Then the door flung open. Kyle Rourke stepped out, slamming the door behind him, his steps radiating fury. "You think you're so damn smart," he snarled, voice thick with venom. "You think that little stunt of yours means you win?" Maya didn't respond immediately. She opened her door, stepping out with perfect calm, her coat fluttering in the morning breeze. She closed the door and looked him dead in the eye, her stare cold as steel. "If I'm not mistaken," she said evenly, "you're the one chasing me." Kyle let out a harsh laugh, humorless. "Chasing you. Is that what this is? I call it fixing a mistake. I'm not letting someone like you humiliate me without consequences." Maya raised an eyebrow. "So, a suspended officer, removed for misconduct, thinks committing a crime will make it right." Kyle's face flushed red. He stepped forward, his boots thudding heavily on the pavement. His eyes blazed with rage. "You ruined my career. I lost everything. Now I'm taking back the only thing I still control." Maya didn't blink. "You have nothing left, and that's on you, not me." Kyle's chest heaved. He reached into his coat, pulled something from inside. A flash of metal caught the morning sun. Maya saw the gun clearly, but she didn't flinch. She had known it would come to this, and she was ready for the end. Maya Sheridan arched an eyebrow, tilting her head with a cold precision. And this mistake you keep talking about, what exactly is it? Deputy Kyle Rourke's jaw clenched, his whole body taut like a wire stretched to its breaking point, letting you walk out of that station like you won, letting you humiliate me in front of my superiors, letting you pull that stunt and think you'd get away with it. He took another step forward, voice lowering to a blade-like hiss. You think you made me look weak? You think you shamed me in front of everyone? Maya stood her ground, her gaze unshaken. You shamed yourself. Kyle. His face darkened, his eyes warping into something twisted and venomous. You don't get it. Do you people like you don't get to walk around like you're untouchable? You challenge authority and expect no one to touch you. Maya took a deep breath, her voice calm, almost chilling. No, I believe following the law makes me different from you. Rourke's eyes narrowed, his shoulders shaken with barely contained fury. You think that badge was the only thing keeping me in line. It's gone now, and I won't let you walk away like nothing happened. He let out a sharp, mirthless laugh. I've had to listen to people whispering behind my back, watching me like I'm a failure, when all I did was my job. He pointed a trembling finger at Maya, rage thick in his voice. And you stand there all smug, like you're above everyone else. Maya didn't respond. She didn't have to. Every word he spat only exposed the truth. He had lost everything: his authority, his control, and the illusion that he could ever intimidate her again. You think this is a game? This isn't some action movie. You're not a hero, but you got treated like one. He growled. Maya replied softly, If I really won, you wouldn't still be standing here. A flicker of doubt crossed Rourke's eyes, but it was quickly drowned by a surge of bottomless rage. You don't get to decide how this ends, he hissed through clenched teeth. Maya stepped forward half a pace, her voice even and resolute. No, but you do. You can get back in your car and leave before this goes any further. Rourke was panting now, fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. He didn't respond with words, he acted. He lunged at her like a cannonball packed with fury and disgrace. But Maya Sheridan had trained soldiers better than him. Rourke's first punch cut through empty air as she sidestepped, letting him stumble forward from his own momentum. Before he could regain balance, her elbow drove hard into his side, forcing a groan from deep in his throat. He staggered back, but not down. He turned again, breathing hard, snarling like a wounded animal. You think you're better than me. Maya stayed silent. He had already lost control. He crouched, trying to use his weight to overpower her. She let him charge, let him believe he was about to win, and at the moment he left himself open. Maya pivoted, hooked her leg around his, and used his own force and weight to slam him down onto the cold asphalt. His back hit the ground with a sharp crack, the sound of pride breaking. He groaned, trying to push himself upright, his breathing ragged, his eyes lost. Maya didn't rush. She took a step back, giving him just enough space to think he had one last chance. But they both knew the fight had ended long ago. Deputy Kyle Rourke struggled to his feet in the middle of the road. Both hands braced against the rough asphalt, his breathing ragged, a trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. He coughed, chest heaving from fury and shock. Never in his life had he imagined being beaten, especially by a woman, and even less so by someone like Maya Sheridan, someone he'd once thought he could control as easily as his other victims. Maya stood a few steps away, watching his every move with cold, unblinking eyes. She didn't sneer, she didn't mock. Her calm presence was the strongest declaration of all that she had never considered Kyle a real threat. "Are you done?" she asked. Her voice cracked across his pride like a slap. Kyle clenched his jaw, hands tightening into fists. His knuckles scraped raw from the fall, but he still refused to give in. With a wounded animal's growl, he launched himself at her again, this time feinting left before swinging right. But Maya had seen that move too many times before. She caught his wrist mid-air, twisted it with surgical precision, and Kyle dropped to one knee from the searing pain. He cried out, instinct beginning to override what little logic he had left as the ache spread up his arm. But Maya wasn't finished. She pulled his arm forward, swept his legs from under him, and slammed him back onto the pavement. This time, the impact was harder. His head hit the road with a thud, and for a moment, his vision blurred to black. The silence that followed was chilling. Only Kyle's ragged breathing filled the empty space, mingled with the faint rustle of wind through the trees. He lay there, stunned and disoriented, unable to grasp how he'd been brought down so swiftly. Maya didn't approach. She stood still, gazing down at him like she was waiting for a reckoning, a flicker of clarity, but she knew it wouldn't come, not from someone like Kyle Rourke. He groaned, slowly rolled over, then pushed himself up again. Each movement labored as though his body were burning from the inside. But his ego, his hollow sense of honor wouldn't let him stop. "You should stay down." "Kyle," Maya warned, her voice steady as ever, but the words only fueled his rage. With a roar, Rourke charged her, wild and reckless. His fist struck her side, a direct hit. Maya winced, instinctively shifting away as pain rippled through her ribs, but she didn't retreat. Seeing the hit land, Kyle thought he'd turned the tide. He swung again, the next blow grazing her jaw. She tasted blood, faint and metallic, but still, she didn't waver. No panic, no fear. She stepped back once, sizing him up, watching as he charged forward, blinded by delusion. She baited him with her stillness. And when he lunged again, overcommitted and exposed, Maya stepped behind him, looped her arm around his neck, and locked in a perfect rear chokehold. Kyle's body spasmed. His hands flailed, grasping for anything that might break her grip. But Maya had him, her legs hooked around his waist, dragging them both down to the pavement. "It's over, Kyle," she said, her voice as cold as forged steel. His breath quickened, then turned erratic. His limbs jerked, but the strength in them was fading fast. His fingers scratched helplessly at the air, his pulse slowing beneath her hold. "Please," he rasped, voice trembling like a scared child. She didn't let go, not immediately. She waited seconds that stretched like minutes until his body went slack. Then she released him, pushing him aside like shedding an empty shell. Kyle lay still, not unconscious, but shattered. For the first time, he understood his power, his pride, his control had all been illusions. Maya stood, brushed herself off, and took a few steps back, drawing in a long breath. The wind caught her hair, lifting it gently as she looked down at the broken man at her feet. She didn't feel rage. She didn't feel pity, only a clear, unwavering certainty she had done the right thing. In that stillness, the low hum of an engine echoed from the distance. She turned. A patrol car approached backup. Someone had called for help. Maya didn't move. She waited, and this time, she was the one in control. Deputy Kyle Rourke slumped against the hood of his battered sedan, his breath ragged, sweat dripping from his temples and mixing with the shame burning in his chest. He had nothing left to hold on to, no authority, no justification, just the total collapse of a man who once believed he was untouchable. And standing before him was Maya Sheridan, the woman he had targeted, the woman he thought he could easily control, now the very one who had brought him to his knees. Maya stood still, her gaze no longer cold with combat, but clear with deliberate watchfulness. There was no satisfaction on her face, no gloating triumph, only a vigilant calm, because she knew men like Kyle, when stripped of everything, were the most dangerous. He gasped for air, still clinging to the last fumes of strength, but Maya didn't need to ask. He wouldn't fight again. Not because he had learned his lesson, but because his body had given out, and his mind had been torn apart by the truth he could no longer deny he had lost. "You think you've won," Kyle whispered, his voice hoarse with pain and bitterness. Maya didn't answer. She only bent down to pick up the phone she had dropped during the chase, eyes never leaving the trembling man clinging to his car. She knew it was time to end this, but first, he had to understand his downfall was his own doing. "You could have walked away from this with your dignity," she said, her voice low and deliberate, each word carving into the last fragments of his pride. All it would have taken was knowing when to stop. But you couldn't. You chose this road. And now you're paying the price. Kyle Rourke staggered to his feet, but dizziness overtook him. His shoulders trembled not from pain, but from the shattering realization that the world he had built around the badge was crumbling piece by piece. You don't know what I've lost," he rasped, eyes glassy with emotion. "You lost things you were never worthy of having." Maya cut in. A siren echoed in the distance. A patrol car. The wind carried the sound of closure with it. Maya knew someone had called for backup, maybe from the earlier distress call. Or maybe someone heard the commotion. It didn't matter. She had done what needed to be done. Kyle Rourke turned to glance down the road where, just hours ago, he had laid a trap. Now, he was the one surrounded. He could run, but he couldn't outrun the truth. He couldn't escape Maya Sheridan. She walked toward him, not fast. Not slow, just enough for him to feel every step pressing down on what little pride he had left. "When you came after me," she said, "you didn't just come for one person. You disrespected the hundreds I've protected. You insulted the values I stood for. You didn't just try to humiliate me, you humiliated the soldiers who fought beside me. And now, you'll face the consequences." He let out a faint, bitter laugh, but there was no strength in it, just the broken reflex of a man waiting for the worst. The patrol car pulled up behind Maya's SUV. 2 officers stepped out. Not colleagues coming to defend him, but men sent to clean up his mess. "You all right, ma'am?" one of them asked, his eyes scanning the bruises on her face, the red mark blooming on her arm. Maya simply nodded, her eyes never leaving Kyle. "Take him." Kyle Rourke was cuffed not for the first time in his life, but for the first time not as the enforcer of the law, but as the one being judged by it. He didn't resist. He walked to the patrol car in silence. Head down, a small figure swallowed by sweat-stained clothes and defeat. As the car rolled away down the empty road, Maya Sheridan finally let her body release for the first time in the entire confrontation. The ache in her ribs, the sting at her lip, the pounding in her chest, all of it surged forward as the adrenaline ebbed. But above all, she felt peace. She turned and walked toward her SUV, the place where it had begun, and where it had ended. She didn't look back. Kyle Rourke's story was over, but Maya Sheridan's wasn't. She still had a long road ahead, and this time, nothing would stop her. Maya Sheridan stepped back, rotating her wrist gently, shaking off the lingering tension still clinging to her muscles. Her ribs still ached from the blow, and her jaw was stiff from the earlier hit. But compared to what Kyle Rourke had just endured, those were surface-level scratches. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze cold as it fell on the deputy slumped over the hood of his aging sedan, arms hanging limp, his trembling body betraying the arrogance he once wore like armor. "You should have known better." Her voice was low, steady, and sharp as a blade. "Men like you always think they can do whatever they want. You think that badge is a shield for abuse, for pushing people down with your power. You think every room you walk into should bend to your will?" She took another step back, her tone heavier now, weighted with finality. "But that game is over. Rourke." He didn't answer, still hunched, as if the slightest movement might shatter whatever pride he had left. Maya stood there for a moment, letting the silence stretch more punishing than any strike, colder than any blow. Then she slipped her hand into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved across the screen unhurried, steady, without anger. When the line connected, her voice was crystal clear. "This is Colonel Maya Sheridan. I need a unit dispatched to my location immediately. I'm reporting an assault and an intentional vehicular attack. The suspect is restrained but non-compliant." Rourke flinched. For the first time since the fight, he moved a twitch born of fear. But Maya didn't look at him. She continued her report with clinical precision, word by word, making it impossible for anyone to question the facts. "Yes," she said, tone unwavering. "The suspect is a police officer, Kyle Rourke. I'll provide my full statement at the station. Please send a full response team." She hung up, slipped the phone back into her pocket as if she'd just finished a routine call. Not a glance toward Rourke, no pity, and that was what frightened him most. "Wait," he croaked, voice ragged, broken by each labored breath. "You don't have to do this." Maya tilted her head slightly, looking at him with no emotion. Rourke swallowed hard, trying to choke down the shame rising like a flood. "You already won," he mumbled, eyes darting away. "And what do you think happens next?" Maya asked, stepping closer. Her voice was quieter now, but it carried more weight than a gavel in court. Rourke pressed his lips together. He didn't answer. He didn't dare. "You chased me," she said, enunciating every word. "You tried to run me off the highway. You attacked me. You escalated this until there was no going back. And now, because you couldn't control yourself, you'll face the consequences." Rourke shook his head, breathing faster. "You don't have to." No." Maya cut him off, eyes like ice. "You don't get to beg now. Not anymore." For a moment, Rourke's face froze as if her words had finally pierced through the facade. He had thought that if he just hit her hard enough, just broke her down fast enough, things would snap back into place: the badge, the respect, the power he once held. But instead of reclaiming anything, he had destroyed it all himself. A siren wailed in the distance. That distinct hum of patrol engines closing in shattered the stillness of the empty road. Rourke shut his eyes, his hand unconsciously clenching. Maya watched the shift within him from rage to fear to despair. The police vehicles arrived, red and blue lights spilling across the glossy hood of the sedan. Rourke had once driven with pride. 3 cars stopped in unison, doors swinging open, officers moving with urgency and caution. Maya stepped aside. Her arms relaxed, her stance peaceful. She posed no threat, and she didn't need to justify a thing. The scene told the whole story. One officer approached a man in his 50s, sharp-eyed, who seemed to recognize her instantly. "Colonel Sheridan?" he asked, his voice a careful mix of professionalism and alertness. "Yes," Maya replied simply. "It's a serious situation." She pointed toward Rourke, now crumpled beside his car, eyes shattered like broken glass. "This man," she said, voice calm but clear, "attacked me, initiated a vehicle assault, engaged in pursuit and inflicted injury. I defended myself. I've subdued him. He's now in your custody." The officer paused for a split second, just enough to register who the suspect was. Then he turned and nodded to his colleagues. "Cuff him." 2 other officers moved swiftly. Rourke jerked in a feeble attempt at resistance, but his body was too far gone. His hands were pulled behind his back. Cold cuffs clamped tight with a metallic snap. They lifted him to his feet, his body swaying like a felled tree barely upright. Maya didn't move, didn't flinch. Rourke, the man who once shouted in her face, tried to make her tremble on an empty stretch of road, was now just a broken shell, his shoulders sagging, his eyes dim. "Rourke," one officer said, repeating the name with a mix of disbelief and bitterness. "You really did this to yourself." Rourke didn't respond. He couldn't. There was nothing left to say. Maya didn't take her eyes off him. One officer gave Rourke a slight push toward the patrol car, but just before he was shoved inside, his head lifted, his eyes locked onto hers one final time. And in that moment, she saw what he had spent his whole life hiding. Fear. It was buried deep beneath the layers of hatred, under the pride that had now crumbled to dust. Maya held his gaze, her voice calm, firm, and final. "You brought this on yourself." The car door slammed shut. The patrol vehicle turned from the scene, taking Kyle Rourke away. Maya exhaled, rolling her shoulders, feeling the tightness in her neck and back begin to loosen. The remaining officers took her statement clear, precise, professional. She left out nothing. There would be no mistakes, no loopholes for Rourke to crawl through. When the scene had been cleared and the officers were preparing to leave, the lead sergeant turned to her. "You okay?" he asked. It wasn't exactly a question, more a quiet acknowledgement. Maya nodded. "I will be." She turned toward her SUV, lighter than she had felt that morning. Rourke had thought this was a battle for control, a clash of power. But what he never understood was this. He had already lost before he ever stepped onto the field, and now he would pay for that mistake for the rest of his life. Maya had no intention of letting Kyle Rourke slip through the cracks of the justice system. No intention of letting him quietly disappear without consequence. Men like him, those who abused power, turned the badge into a weapon instead of a duty, had been forgiven too many times. Not this time. The moment she left the precinct after giving her full statement, Maya took the next step. She called her attorney a woman she trusted deeply, someone who couldn't be swayed by pressure from the system. She knew Rourke would try everything, play the victim, twist the story, bend the truth, but Maya wasn't going to let that happen. She filed formal charges: assault, reckless endangerment with a motor vehicle, and public endangerment. She submitted her dash cam footage. There was no room left for doubt. By the time Rourke opened his mouth, the evidence would already be waiting ready to suffocate every excuse. Her second call was to a journalist she trusted. The story had to be told. Not just what happened to her, but what Rourke had been doing for years. Everything that had been buried, dismissed, quietly brushed aside was about to come to light. She didn't need to say much. The truth spoke for itself. The news spread quickly. Within hours, Kyle Rourke's name was all over the headlines. Former deputy under investigation for assaulting Army. Colonel disciplinary history revealed in internal reports. How long has the system protected a repeat offender? What Maya had suspected and always known was now confirmed. Rourke had a past. A disgraceful one: complaints of racial profiling, excessive force, intimidation, each one quietly handled internally, swept under the rug. Not this time. An internal investigation was launched almost immediately. The same people who once looked the other way now scrambled to prove their integrity. Rourke was suspended indefinitely while a criminal investigation unfolded. But Maya knew there was no salvaging this. Public pressure, undeniable evidence, a trail of misconduct that had gone ignored for too long. No one was lining up to defend him now. Less than a week later, the department issued a formal termination. By the end of the month, a court date had been set. When Maya received official confirmation that Rourke had been dismissed, she didn't smile. She didn't need to, because this wasn't victory. It was justice. But Maya also understood justice didn't end there. Men like Rourke, after being stripped of the badge, rarely disappeared. They resurfaced in private security firms as tactical consultants, lurking for another door to slip back through. Maya had seen it before. She swore it wouldn't happen again. The day the trial officially began, the city held its breath. For weeks, every headline carried the name Deputy Kyle Rourke, a once feared figure of authority now facing a slew of serious criminal charges: assault, intentional bodily harm, attempted murder, each one leveled at a man the system had long protected. The courtroom was packed, all eyes fixed on the defendant's table, waiting to see whether justice would truly be served. Maya Sheridan entered the courtroom in a dark business suit, her eyes unwavering, her steps steady. She wasn't there for revenge. She didn't come to prove anything to anyone. She came because the truth had to be spoken, and justice had to be upheld. Across the room, Rourke sat among his defense attorneys. His face was cold, his eyes still clinging to that trace of arrogance, as if nothing had changed. He looked worn. But the way he crossed his arms, sat back in his chair, it was as though he was still convincing himself this was all a mistake, that somehow he'd walk away. The prosecution began with dashcam footage from Maya's SUV. Frame by frame appeared on the big screen the chase, the collision, the brutal hand-to-hand fight between a man who once enforced the law and a woman who had once defended her country. Every movement, every threat, every blow laid bare for the court to see, unmistakable, unforgivable. one by one. Rourke's former colleagues' officers who once covered for him were called to the stand. They couldn't stay silent any longer. The internal investigation had revealed a long, damning history of misconduct from racial profiling during patrols to excessive use of force. Complaints, once buried, victims once ignored, now presented with undeniable evidence. When Maya Sheridan was called to testify, she didn't hesitate. She stepped to the stand with clear eyes and unwavering posture. Her responses were precise, calm, and firm. She recounted everything: the veteran's ceremony that morning, the unjustified stop, Rourke's attempts to provoke her, and the eventual highway chase. Her voice never wavered, her gaze never flinched. Because for Maya, the truth didn't need embellishment. The defense tried to discredit her, accusing her of provoking the situation, of suspicious behavior for not carrying her military ID. But those arguments collapsed under the weight of evidence and Maya's quiet resolve. She wasn't just any woman. She was a former colonel who had served nearly 2 decades, trained hundreds of soldiers, survived war zones, and, most of all, she knew exactly what she was doing when she chose to fight in silence. When her testimony ended and Maya stepped down from the witness stand, the room fell into silence. Everyone from civilians to seasoned officers recognized one thing: what had happened could no longer be buried, and someone like Rourke had no place in law enforcement ever again. The trial stretched on for days, but the verdict had long been written on every face in the room. The jury didn't take long. Kyle Rourke was found guilty on all counts. Each guilty landed like a nail into the coffin of his career. Rourke bowed his head. No more defiance, no more arrogance, only a man who had lost everything: his career, his honor, and ultimately, himself. But for Maya Sheridan, it wasn't over. She didn't just bring Rourke to criminal court, she pursued him into civil court as well. This wasn't about compensation. It was about ensuring he would never again operate in any sphere of influence or power. Her civil lawsuit outlined physical injuries: fractured ribs, bruising along her jaw and temple, the final marks left before she subdued him. She submitted damage assessments for her SUV dented panels, scraped paint, impact evidence from his attempted vehicular assault, all documented, all attached. But the most important part of the case wasn't financial. It was the message that men like Rourke and others like him would no longer walk away untouched. The civil judgment was the final stamp, sealing off every avenue he might have tried to use to rebuild his power. News of the lawsuit spread fast. Watchdog organizations, women's rights advocates, veterans groups all voiced their support for Maya. Some began to call her a symbol of resilience, a woman who stood up to corrupted power, who exposed a system that protected predators in uniform. She didn't go on TV, didn't write a book, didn't give speeches. She simply continued living quietly, firmly, just as she always had. When the civil judgment came down, Kyle Rourke was left nearly penniless, his accounts frozen, his assets seized. No company would hire him. No community would take him in. His name became a case study in law enforcement ethics, training a warning that no badge could permanently shield the corrupt. As for Maya Sheridan, she returned to her work consulting for security and defense organizations. The bruises faded, the scars healed, but the memory remained not as trauma, but as a quiet reminder: justice doesn't arrive in sweeping gestures. It lives in quiet defiance, in every unwavering stand that says, "Enough." And then, One early morning, she drove her familiar SUV down the same road where everything had happened. The world was still. Soft sunlight filtered through the trees lining the highway. She rolled down the window, took a deep breath. No one followed. No more shadows. Just Maya Sheridan, strong, steady, and absolutely free. When Maya Sheridan took the witness stand, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She could feel Deputy Kyle Rourke's gaze, sharp as a blade, locked on her, searching for a crack, a flicker of hesitation, a sign she might falter. But Rourke would find nothing. The prosecutor stepped forward, voice firm and clear. "Colonel Sheridan, can you describe the events that occurred that morning?" Maya took a deep breath. Her voice was steady, unwavering. "I was on my way to work, as usual. When I noticed a police vehicle with lights flashing behind me, I immediately pulled over. But I quickly realized this wasn't a routine traffic stop." "And how did you come to that conclusion?" the prosecutor asked. "Because I asked for the reason I was being stopped, and Deputy Rourke didn't provide a lawful explanation. Instead, he began questioning my identity, pressing me about my military rank, and escalating the situation unnecessarily." "Did you feel you were being treated as a suspect?" Maya nodded. "From the very first moment. This wasn't about enforcing the law. This was about asserting personal power. And when I didn't react the way he wanted, he escalated." Rourke shifted in his seat at the defense table, hands gripping the armrests, jaw clenched. He hated hearing this, and Maya knew it. The prosecutor continued. "At what point did the situation spiral out of control when he demanded I exit my vehicle without clear cause? I refused and cited my legal rights. Rourke immediately threatened arrest, then proceeded to illegally search my car, tearing through my belongings in search of something that wasn't there. And instead of letting me go, he kept me detained. That's when I knew this wasn't a duty call. It was a power play." When asked about the events after Rourke's suspension, Maya calmly replied, "He followed me. In his personal vehicle, he tailed me, blocked me off on a deserted road, and tried to force me off the highway." The courtroom stirred with hushed murmurs. The prosecutor's tone dropped. "Do you believe he intended to harm you?" Maya raised her head. "I believe Deputy Rourke intended to kill me." The room fell deathly still once more. The prosecutor asked, "When you were forced to defend yourself, how did he respond?" "He didn't stop. Even when it was clear he couldn't win. Even after I gave him multiple chances to walk away, he kept going." To him, this wasn't about survival. It was about clinging to control. And when he had no options left, what did he do? Maya turned fully toward Rourke, her eyes locked on his. He ran. Rourke's face flushed. His hands trembled beneath the table. Her words struck like a final blow to whatever pride he had left. With no further questions, the prosecution stepped away, and Maya left the stand with measured calm. She didn't glance at the defendant. She didn't need to. He had nothing left with which to threaten her. The trial continued for several more days, but everyone in that room knew Rourke had lost long ago. His records were laid bare, dozens of complaints alleging racism, excessive force, misconduct, all previously swept under the rug by internal affairs, now dragged into the light. The judge, a man with eyes like cold steel, called for final statements. The courtroom tensed. This was Rourke's last chance to show remorse or take responsibility, or to destroy what little remained of his dignity. Rourke stood stiffly, his gaze rigid. "I was just doing my job," he said. "I acted on instinct, with no malicious intent, and now I'm being treated like a criminal." A wave of outrage rippled through the courtroom. Maya said nothing, but the contempt in her eyes said it all. Rourke had never felt remorse, only regret that he had lost. The judge cut him off. Sentencing was delivered 12 years in prison for assault, attempted manslaughter, and abuse of power. No parole, no leniency. Rourke slumped into his seat, lips pressed tight, face pale. For the first time, he understood his power was gone. No backup was coming. No system could shield him now. Maya stood as the trial concluded, walking out with the same calm strength she brought into that room. Reporters surged forward, but she didn't stop. No statement, no soundbite. Justice had spoken, and this time, it hadn't been silenced. Deputy Kyle Rourke sat silently in his cell, back pressed against the cold metal bench, wrists still marked red from the cuffs. There was no noise, no applause, no camera flashes, just the heavy stillness pressing down on him like a wet blanket he couldn't shake off. He stared at the floor, eyes sunken, chin bruised, ribs still aching from the brutal encounter he had instigated and lost. But it wasn't the physical pain that kept him awake. It was the memory. Maya Sheridan's eyes not angry, not contemptuous, just cold, indifferent, as if he had never mattered, as if he had died in her eyes long ago across the city. Maya stood by the tall windows of her attorney's office. Morning light streamed through the glass, casting shadows across the thick file on the table. Sheridan v. Rourke, bound in red twine. She placed her hand gently on it, feeling each crease, each word a testament to the long, punishing road she had walked to reclaim justice. The criminal trial was over. Rourke had received a 15-year federal sentence, but Maya knew that wasn't enough. He could reappear not as a cop, but as a bodyguard, a security consultant, a man tucked into the background where people were willing to look the other way. That's why she pursued the civil suit. This time, the goal was to make sure he never stood back up again. Her attorney, Grant Whitaker, stepped in, placing a draft motion on the table, an asset seizure request covering Rourke's home, investment accounts, pending pension from the department, and even the personal vehicle he'd used to chase her. "We're not letting him walk away like none of this happened," Grant said, his tone firm. "We're taking away every inch he could cling to." Maya nodded. Do it. The moment the civil suit became public, the media storm exploded. News outlets, television pundits, and social media lit up with coverage of the lawsuit against former Deputy Kyle Rourke. Some hailed Maya as a symbol of courage, a voice the justice system sorely needed. Others, predictably, accused her of taking down a man who once served his community. But Maya didn't let herself get pulled into the noise. She didn't give interviews. She didn't join panels. She let the facts speak. Medical reports, photos of her injuries, collision damage assessments, full dashcam footage, and most damning records showing Rourke had received off-the-books bonuses from undisclosed sources. No company wanted his name on their payroll anymore. No organization wanted the liability. His career was not just over, it was incinerated. At the first day of the civil trial, Maya didn't walk in as just a plaintiff. She entered as a defender of principle, no military uniform, no medals, just quiet determination, a steel presence, and one clear goal to seal off any return path for the man who once weaponized authority to harm the innocent. Rourke, now visibly thinner, sat beside his court-appointed attorney. He barely looked up. His eyes were hollow, his features collapsed. Everything that had once made Deputy Rourke feared his swagger, his authority was gone. An empty shell remained. Maya's attorney read the charges. Line by line, physical injuries, property damage, reputational harm, prolonged emotional distress caused by sustained threats to her life. The final compensation demand, $4.5 million, Rourke's side didn't contest it. There was nothing left to fight with. No funds for a private lawyer, no voice to argue. Weeks later, the judgment was handed down. All existing and future assets of Kyle Rourke were to be seized as compensation. In addition, a lifetime professional ban from any role related to security, law enforcement, or firearms, a formal, irreversible end. As she stepped out of the courthouse, Maya didn't look back. She didn't need to see how Rourke was escorted away. She didn't care if his eyes still held hatred. The past had been dealt with. The verdicts had all been handed down. It was time to move forward. In a quiet cafe later that week, Maya sat with Nora Ellis, a former internal affairs officer who had helped expose Rourke's record. Nora tilted her head, smiled faintly, her voice low. "You know, someone once told me justice may be slow, but it never forgets." Maya took a sip of her coffee, gaze drifting toward the window. Outside, the city kept moving, busy, indifferent. People passed each other, unaware that someone powerful had fallen, thinking he could rise above the law. "I've never allowed myself to forget," she said softly, her voice like breath. But her eyes, sharp as a blade, said the rest. The cold gray walls of the prison cell closed in around Deputy Kyle Rourke, pressing against him like a tightening grip, suffocating what little pride he had left. The cell was small, the light dim, and the silence thick as wet cement. It felt like being buried alive in the very end he had created for himself. Everything had happened so quickly. The sentencing, the gavel's echoing strike, the murmurs of satisfaction from the courtroom gallery, the firm grip of the officer who escorted him out, it all blurred together like a nightmare with no end. He had heard every sound, every step, every look of scorn, but none of it felt real until he was locked in this room alone with the truth. For years, Kyle believed men like him didn't fall. The system had always protected him, turning a blind eye to complaints, glossing over his misconduct, ensuring someone always had his back. That was how the world worked, and he had grown comfortable living that way. But that illusion shattered the moment he was forced to sit at the defendant's table and listen to Maya Sheridan, the woman he once believed he could crush, recount everything with calm precision and ruthless truth. He had thought he could shame her, intimidate her, break her beneath the weight of a system that never stood with women like her. But Maya never wavered, and that was what dismantled the arrogant empire Kyle Rourke had built around himself. He clenched his fists, nails digging into the coarse fabric of his prison uniform. The question kept looping in his mind. How did it come to this? He had once known how to bend the law. He'd seen colleagues get away with worse transferred quietly, shielded by procedure. But now, he had become the cautionary tale. In truth, what Kyle couldn't stomach wasn't the arrest or the sentence, it was being brought down by Maya Sheridan. She had challenged him. She refused fear, refused submission. She beat him not just physically, but mentally, legally, symbolically. Even now, knowing he had lost, he couldn't stop hating her. Outside, Maya Sheridan stood on the federal courthouse steps in Richmond. No cameras, no crowd. Just her, the fading afternoon light, and a rare, quiet peace. This battle was over. Justice had been done. But Maya knew this wasn't the end. The fight she stepped into had never been about one man. It was about a broken system, about the thousands of voices that had been silenced, about the people who never got the chance she had. Rourke had simply been the face, the vessel of corrupted authority torn from a place he thought untouchable. From now on, the name Kyle Rourke would no longer evoke respect. It would be synonymous with failure, with misconduct, with the downfall of a system that had once protected him. The badge he had worn like a weapon was now nothing more than a scrap of metal evidence of what had finally been exposed. Maya harbored no illusions that this was the final word on justice. She knew that defenders of Rourke would emerge, that excuses would be made, that some would claim she had weaponized the system to take down a public servant. But she didn't care. She hadn't done this for fame. She hadn't done it to prove anything to the world. She had done it for the silenced, for the displaced, because this system, flawed as it was, had, for once, done the right thing. Rourke had been given the chance to acknowledge his wrongs. He could have reclaimed a sliver of dignity, but like so many arrogant men before him, he chose pride. And now he would live with the consequences 15 years behind bars, stripped of his status, abandoned by the very institution he once used to shield himself. Inside his cell, Kyle Rourke lifted his eyes to the ceiling. His gaze was dull, his expression blank. He could hear the echo of fading footsteps. Maya was gone. Not gone from his life, just gone from the role of adversary. She had won, and she didn't even need to look back. That, more than the sentence, more than the isolation, that was what burned. Maya, that name, would echo in his mind like the wreckage of his legacy. She hadn't just taken his career. She shattered his pride, unveiled his lies, and brought a man once seen as untouchable to his knees with integrity, intelligence, and unwavering will. Although she had never sought the spotlight or praise, in the end, Maya Sheridan was spoken of as a symbol of resolve. After the trial concluded, she returned to her routine at the base, no pomp, no noise, still the same person, quiet, strong, and unshakable. But what she couldn't prevent was the attention. Commendations from superiors came flooding in. The Pentagon issued an official statement praising her composure and bravery throughout the ordeal. Within the military, an institution that often avoids politically charged conflicts, Maya's actions were held up as a model, a reminder that courage isn't only forged in combat zones, but also in moments when one stands up to injustice. High-ranking officers called her directly, not just to express admiration, but to learn from her. Her story became required training material, not to idolize her, but to teach future officers that honor is sometimes built in the quiet moments when one dares to confront a system rotting from the inside. But for Maya, glory was never the goal. Everything she did came down to a single truth. It was the right thing to do. Elsewhere, behind cold walls and iron bars, Kyle Rourke sat hunched over on a rusted steel chair in a federal prison. He had once been feared on patrol, once shouted orders that others obeyed without question. Now, he had nothing but simmering bitterness and a long stretch of unmarked days. He had thought himself untouchable. He believed the system would always protect people like him, those who knew how to bend reality to serve their egos. But he was wrong. Maya was not like the others. She didn't bow, didn't remain silent, and most of all, she wasn't afraid. The press had called him the face of a failed justice system. Former colleagues deleted him from contact lists. No one defended him. No one stepped forward to speak on his behalf. He didn't just lose a job. He lost the very identity that once gave him power. Rourke never stopped thinking about Maya. Not out of regret, but out of hatred. In his mind, she was the reason for everything that had happened, even though he had been the one to push it too far, and yet, deep down, he knew she had won completely. Back at the base, Maya took on new assignments. People greeted her differently now, not with curiosity, but with respect. They understood she wasn't just a high-ranking officer. She was living proof of a simple truth. No one, not even those with a badge, is above the law. Every time she walked down a hallway, she caught the whispers. That's her, the one who did it. Not in a sensational way, but with the reverence reserved for those who have done something that should have been done long ago. Civil rights groups reached out. Several law schools invited her to speak about the case as a landmark precedent in military justice. But Maya declined most of them. She didn't need a stage. She needed peace, the kind she had earned with blood, tears, and pain that left no visible scars. Each night, when Maya returned home, the light in her kitchen was always on. She'd sit by the window, sometimes just to gaze at the front yard, not to keep watch, not out of fear that Rourke would come back, but simply to savor a world where he no longer existed. She didn't forget him, but she no longer allowed him to define her. In a world where justice often comes late or not at all, she had proved that it could be reclaimed, if one remained patient, clear-headed, and refused to let anger cloud the mission. On the day Rourke was officially transferred to federal prison, Maya received a letter from someone she had never met, the ex-wife of another one of Rourke's victims. The letter contained only one line: "Thank you for not staying silent like we did." She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not to display, but to remind herself that silence is never neutral. It is complicity. And throughout this journey, the thing Maya was proudest of was not that she had been strong, but that she had not stayed silent. The story doesn't end in celebration. It ends with a truth justice never comes easily, but when it does, it carries a weight that cannot be denied. And for Maya Sheridan, that was the most rightful victory a person could ever earn. Maya Sheridan's story is not just a journey to reclaim justice for herself. It is a reminder that sometimes darkness only retreats when someone dares to stand up. From the moment she was stopped on a deserted road to the final courtroom where justice was served, every step Maya took echoed a single truth: power can never replace integrity, and silence is not an option in the face of injustice. We witnessed a woman who stood alone, yet never alone in will. She did not win through violence, but through calm resolve, sharp intellect, and the steel discipline of a soldier trained to face danger, yet never back down from what's right. She didn't seek revenge. She simply made sure someone was held accountable. Perhaps what makes this story so powerful is how real it feels, the rage that had to be contained, the pain too deep for words, and the price one pays for truth. But above all, it is about light, the kind that people like Maya protect and carry forward with unwavering courage. If you've ever felt the world was unfair, remember Maya. If you've ever thought one person couldn't make a difference, look at her journey. And if you ever find yourself at a crossroads between staying silent or speaking up, choose to speak up. Because you're not just protecting yourself. You're standing up for those who never had the chance to, Thank you for following this story. If it touched you, made you reflect, or simply gave you hope and justice, please like this video, share it with someone who might need the strength, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the stories that matter. Some stories need to be told not for entertainment, but to awaken something. And sometimes, just one story can change the way someone sees the world. Thank you for listening. Until our next journey.